Welcome to the Graduated Thoughts Podcast.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Since you already follow, the intersections of history, culture, and wellness, you probably realize that modern herbalism often gets, well, it gets completely whitewashed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We see a lot of this aesthetic packaging and, frankly, very little acknowledgement of where these practices actually originated. So today we are cutting through all that mainstream wellness noise. We're exploring the profound, incredibly resilient, and often deeply misunderstood world of African-American herbalism, hoodoo, conjure, and Black spiritual healing traditions.
That's a huge topic.
It is. And we are pulling from an incredible foundation of knowledge today. We're looking at the history compiled in African-American herbalism, Arthur Flower's amazing book, The Hoodoo Book of Flowers, and some broader texts on rootwork and conjure.
And, it is a remarkable body of knowledge to synthesize. What's most fascinating here, I think, is how these traditions represent a living, breathing bridge between the past and the present.
Right.
Because these systems were born out of the absolute harshest realities of enslavement in the Americas, yet they're anchored in ancient, highly sophisticated botanical and spiritual wisdom. They weren't just reactionary, they were custodial.
Custodial. That custodial aspect is exactly what we want to unpack today for you listening.
Yeah.
Because our mission is to bypass the sort of Halloween stereotypes and look at the actual mechanics of these practices.
Exactly.
We want to understand how they functioned historically and how they operate today as these profound systems of medicine, cultural continuity, and honestly, spiritual empowerment. So looking at the origins, you immediately hit this massive logistical hurdle right off the bat.
The geography.
Yes. Enslaved Africans were forcibly brought to a completely alien landscape. The flora of North America was entirely foreign to them.
Right.
So how did they actually figure out what was safe to use and, what would just outright kill them?
That is the crucial question. And it points directly to this incredible, often overlooked collaboration. Part of their survival involved forming what historians call underground networks of resistance alongside indigenous American tribes.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to picture the geography of the early American South. You've got these dense swamps, deep woods, the margins of plantations where enslaved Africans and Native Americans coexisted. They were either in hiding or in forced proximity.
So they were interacting constantly.
Right, and it wasn't just about sharing escape routes. It was an urgent, practical exchange of botanical survival strategies.
Because the indigenous peoples already had, thousands of years of working knowledge of the local ecosystem.
Thousands of years, yes.
So they introduced enslaved Africans to North American flora that would eventually become absolute staples in Black herbalism. You see the adoption of things like yellow root for severe digestive issues, and Indian turnip root, which was apparently critical for respiratory balance in those damp, freezing conditions. And then you have the integration of echinacea, wild yam, and black cohosh.
Yeah, but it is really important to note that this wasn't just a one-way assimilation.
Right. It went both ways.
Far from it. It was a highly dynamic exchange. Africans brought their own profound agricultural and botanical expertise, and they brought actual seeds that survived the transatlantic slave trade.
Which is just incredible to think about.
It really is. We are talking about plants that fundamentally altered the agricultural and culinary landscape of the Americas. Things like okra, the kola nut, tamarind, sesame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these were seamlessly integrated into the shared herbal knowledge. And beyond just the physical botany, there was a really deep synchronicity in how both cultures viewed the natural world.
Like a shared philosophy.
Exactly. Both held immense respect for the animistic qualities of plants. So practices like smudging, creating herbal baths, and the ceremonial use of sweetgrass and cedar, these formed powerful, enduring cultural bridges between the two groups.
It's fascinating how the African and indigenous knowledge merged like that. But we can't ignore the incredibly dark context they were operating in.
No, we cannot.
They were still enslaved under European colonizers, which forced a third, much grimmer element into this holistic healing system. The historical record is very clear that enslaved people were frequently the victims of horrific medical experimentation by white physicians.
Yes.
Yet simultaneously, enslaved herbalists were heavily relied upon to maintain the health of the entire plantation. They were caring for the enslavers, their families, and the enslaved population.
Which brings up a profound point about adaptation under duress. Enslaved practitioners were forced to participate in and observe European colonial medicine.
Right.
But they ingeniously adapted those techniques. They filtered them through their own ancestral epistemology. You see, European physicians relied heavily on alcohol-based extractions and imported apothecaries.
Okay.
But enslaved herbalists who already understood medicinal extraction from their own traditions, they refined these methods using whatever meager resources they could scavenge.
They made it work with what they had.
Exactly. They mastered complex poulticing, advanced fermentation, and decoctions, seamlessly weaving European methodology into an Afro-Indigenous botanical framework.
Let's ground this with a specific plant to really show you how this adaptability worked in practice. Take mullein. The botanical name is Verbascum thapsus.
Oh, mullein is a perfect example.
But the colloquial names for this plant are so incredibly tactile. They almost tell you exactly how it was used. Your names like velvet herb, blanket herb, Adam's flannel, and clown's lungwort.
Those names perfectly describe the thick, downy, soft, almost fabric-like texture of the leaves. In the brutal conditions of enslavement, respiratory illnesses from exposure and grueling dawn-to-dusk labor were rampant.
I can imagine.
Enslaved Africans identified mullein in this new environment, recognized its physical properties, and adopted it as a critical expectorant. They brewed strong teas from it to treat persistent coughs and clear the lungs.
And didn't they use it externally too?
Yes. They took those broad, soft leaves and applied them directly as poultices to draw out inflammation and soothe the severe joint and muscle pain caused by manual labor. It is quite literally a masterclass in applied environmental medicine.
But the medicine wasn't just environmental or physical. And here's where it gets really interesting. This is where we transition from herbalism into the spiritual realm of hoodoo and voodoo.
The spiritual framework is essential.
When you look at mainstream culture today, hoodoo is almost universally misrepresented. Arthur Flowers points this out so sharply in his book. He notes that the general public dismisses it as this slavery time hoodoo, which he defines as a collection of spells, hells, and black cat bones.
Yeah.
It gets reduced to a Halloween clown show or just a cultural curiosity.
Which is a profound tragedy of cultural erasure. The reality is that hoodoo is an indigenous African-American spiritual tradition. Flowers describes it wonderfully. He calls it a Congo-fused folk magic system.
Congo-fused. I love that term.
It's brilliant. When he says Congo-fused, he is highlighting the direct fusion of specific Central African Congo cosmologies. These are deep beliefs about the ancestors, the spirit world, and the movement of energy, all adapted for survival in the American South.
So it's not magic in the way we see it in movies.
Not at all. The word magic in this context shouldn't evoke parlor tricks or fantasy. It was a deeply custodial wellness tradition. When a population is subjected to relentless, systemic, legal violence, they require a system to safeguard their bodies, their minds, and their communities.
We see that exact same survival mechanism in voodoo practices too, right?
Yeah.
Like enslaved Africans in places like Louisiana embraced the teachings of voodoo to maintain a sense of autonomy and balance.
Excellent.
They relied heavily on specific herbs, like saw, palmetto, and garlic. But the text emphasizes that the consumption of the herb was only a fraction of the cure.
Exactly. It's holistic.
It was an entire ecosystem of healing that utilized polyrhythmic songs, dances, and herbal offerings to appease the spiritual entities, to restore harmony to a fractured reality.
That concept of balance is the cornerstone of Rootwork. In Hoodoo and Conjure, physical healing and spiritual intention are entirely inseparable. You aren't just taking a plant to cure a headache.
Right.
You are combining the chemical properties of the botanical with a highly specific spiritual directive. For example, calamus root and black pepper are frequently highlighted in the sources.
What do?
Well, they have medicinal properties, yes, but in Rootwork, they are utilized symbolically to command respect, to clear energetic blockages, or to protect the practitioner from malice.
And that symbology is the foundation of mojo bags, isn't it?
Yes, the mojo bag is central.
For those listening who might not know, these are small, usually red flannel, hand-sewn pouches. And they're filled with specific roots, herbs, carved charms, and sometimes even things like silver dimes or shells.
Very specific ingredients.
Right. A practitioner would craft one for you to carry for protection, or to draw luck, or to shield you from the law. They carry the literal power of the practitioner and the spiritual realm. And the rituals surrounding these roots are fascinating. Take High John the Conqueror root.
Ah, the legendary High John root, the absolute crown jewel of conjure.
Exactly. What I find so compelling about High John the Conqueror root is the ritual around it. You can't just buy a piece of the root, shove it in your pocket, and expect your life to magically change.
No, it requires a relationship.
You have to dress it. You have to feed it.
Yeah.
Practitioners will anoint it with their favorite liquor, or a specific botanical oil, or breathe a blessing over it. By doing that, you are actively waking up the soul of the conqueror that lives inside the root.
Right, you are partnering with the spirit of the plant so it can get to work clearing obstacles from your path.
And that concept of waking something up really segues perfectly into the actual architecture of the practitioner's own soul. Because when we talk about a mojo bag, we have to deconstruct what mojo actually means.
We do, because the word has been so thoroughly co-opted by pop culture that it's lost all its actual weight.
Totally.
But in this tradition, mojo is life force. It is God force. It is the raw, vibrating essence of the universe that we all have access to. The texts describe it beautifully. It isn't just the breath in your lungs. It is the divine spark that activates the clay of our physical bodies.
Activates the clay. I love that phrasing. It implies we are just inert material without that spiritual current running through us.
Precisely. It represents our direct slice of the divine. And what is remarkably sophisticated here is the psychological realism of the practice.
How so?
Well, Hoodoo acknowledges that you can easily lose your mojo. You aren't expected to be operating at peak spiritual capacity at all times.
Well, that makes sense.
Your life force can be drained by self-destructive habits, a poor diet, toxic environments, or simply the crushing weight of systemic oppression. And when you lose it, the tradition doesn't tell you to just hustle harder or push through blindly.
It gives you permission to rest.
Exactly. It demands that you accept a period of fallowness. You must allow your physical and spiritual batteries to recharge.
That acceptance of fallowness requires an incredible amount of self-awareness. And it brings us to a major paradigm shift regarding human psychology in this tradition. Hoodoo theology postulates that you don't just have one monolithic soul.
This is one of my favorite concepts in the literature.
It's mind-blowing. You have two distinct souls. You have the home soul and you have the traveling soul.
It is a brilliant framework for understanding consciousness. The home soul is your foundational integrity. It is your soul shield. The tradition describes it as the part of you that keeps a steady, unshakable course in the absolute maelstrom of forces pulling at you every day.
And its mantra, quite literally, is, I am master, here.
I am master here. That is a profound affirmation of sovereignty, especially coming from a population whose physical sovereignty was brutally stolen from them.
It's the ultimate reclamation of the self. That is your home base. But then you have the traveling soul.
Yes, the outward-facing aspect.
Right. This is the aggressor, the point of the spear. This is the consciousness that journeys out into the waking world to do business, that travels in dreams, that engages in astral projection. And it is the aspect of you that eventually goes ancestral when your physical life concludes.
An advanced meditational practice in Hoodoo involves learning to separate your consciousness, keeping the home soul fortified while safely sending the traveling soul out to gain perspective and return with knowledge.
But navigating that kind of power, managing these two souls, it requires something highly specific. And the texts are uncompromising about this. It requires impeccable character.
Impeccable.
The Hoodoo path is not about seeking wild, altered states of reality just for the thrill of the esoteric. It is entirely about forging an illuminated character.
It requires an almost militant discipline of will. The texts frequently invoke the Kandakes.
The ancient queens.
Yes. These were the fierce, ancient warrior queens of Nubia who famously stopped the Roman Empire at the gates of Africa. That is the level of unyielding discipline, nobility, and strategic foresight expected of a true practitioner.
That's a high bar.
It is! You simply do not get to command the spirits or guide your community if your own psychological house is a mess. There's a strict zero-tolerance rule regarding unethical behavior in these ranks. The saying goes, one lie spoils a dozen truths.
Which means a practitioner's integrity is their most valuable tool. And that leads us into how these root workers actually operate within and elevate their communities. We're talking about destiny work or the profound art of guidance.
Yes, and this operates on two main frequencies, consultation and conjuration.
Right. So if we look at consultation, this is the intimate one-on-one guidance. The tradition refers to it as solicitory. And what is fascinating to me is that it isn't necessarily about mystical incantations.
Not at all. A vast majority of it is just profound, highly observant common sense. It's the psychological ability of the root worker to expose the sheer dissonance between a client's reality and their self-limiting beliefs.
It's therapy, essentially.
In many ways, yes. It's looking at someone, seeing past all their defenses, and telling them exactly how they're trapping themselves.
The history gives us this incredible figure, Aunt Zippy Tull, who lived over in Drummondtown, Virginia. She was known as a hoodoo who was more head than hand.
More head than hand, meaning she didn't rely on theatrical props.
Exactly. She didn't use cards. She didn't throw bones to dazzle her clients. She just looked at them and told it straight. When you think about the modern wellness industry today, where people are paying hundreds of dollars for specialized crystals or aura readings, there is something so deeply refreshing about an ancestral healer whose entire modality was just delivering the unvarnished truth.
Absolutely. Aunt Zippy Tull represents the immediate intervention. But on the larger scale, you have conjuration. If consultation is the quick fix for the individual, conjuration is distinct guidance for the collective.
It's playing the long game.
Yes, the long game. It is the strategic empowerment of a whole community over decades. Practitioners operate on what is called the Hoodoo Board of Destiny, making moves that ensure the vision, the safety, and the survival of their people are secured for generations to come.
And all of this, the consultation, the conjuration, the root work, revolves around one central gravitational concept, Fae. F-A.
Fae.
It's a Fawn word originating from West Africa that translates roughly to fate, destiny, or your divine narrative. It is the lifelong quest to answer the question, is this the path the gods meant for me?
Finding your Fae is about aligning your personal trajectory with the orderly, magnificent operation of the universe. The tradition suggests that every single person is born with a hoodoo mission, a specific, vital contribution we are supposed to make to the common good.
So a practitioner's ultimate job, their highest calling, is to Fae-track their client, to forcefully wake them up to their greater destiny.
And it takes force sometimes.
It really does. To illustrate how vital this is, there's an incredible story about a legendary practitioner named Queen Mother Memphis.
Oh, the eagle story. Yes.
She was walking one day and met a farmer who had found an abandoned eaglet and raised it in the dirt alongside his chickens. So this eagle grows up fully believing it is a chicken. It pecks at the grain, it scurries around the yard, it never once attempts to fly.
And Queen Mother Memphis sees this magnificent bird acting like poultry and is horrified.
Completely. She tells the farmer, this is no Fae for an eagle.
It is the ultimate metaphor for denied destiny, the tragedy of immense potential locked inside a forgotten identity.
Exactly. So she picks the eagle up, points it at the open sky, and commands it to fly. But the eagle is terrified. It just jumps back down to eat dirt with the chickens.
Because it doesn't know what it is yet.
Right. But Queen Mother Memphis refuses to let it live a lie. She takes this eagle on a journey, climbing all the way to the absolute highest peak of a jagged mountain. She holds the bird out over the precipice so it can see the massive, sweeping vista of the entire world below.
And then
She says, fly. The eagle hesitates, looks down at the world, and suddenly the wind hits its feathers, and it remembers what it is. It unfurls its massive wings and launches itself into the sky.
deviating from your Fa means denying your fundamental nature. It is acting like a chicken when your ancestral lineage demands you be an eagle. The root worker's job is to forcefully carry you to that mountain peak so you can see your own vast potential.
And sometimes, waking someone up to their Fa requires delivering harsh, philosophical truths. Which brings to mind the other great parable of the tradition, the story of Stagali and the Babajan.
The Stagli story is brilliant because it tackles the ego head-on.
Yes, Stagali is a famous, tough-as-nails, highly volatile folk figure. One day, he walks up to the Babajan, who is a deeply wise, elder conjurman. Stagali demands to know, what is the difference between heaven and hell?
And the Babajan barely looks at him.
Right. He just says, don't waste my time with ignorant questions.
Yeah.
Well, Stagali's ego is incredibly fragile. He is quick to take offense, he gets absolutely furious, and instantly draws his pistol, ready to kill the old man over a slight.
But the Babajan doesn't flinch.
He doesn't flinch at all. He calmly points at the loaded gun and says, that is hell.
It is a masterful psychological disruption. A sudden, jarring mirror held up to Stagali's destructive, impulsive rage.
It stops Stagali in his tracks. He is suddenly shamefaced. He realizes he's been played. But he's been played in a way that taught him a profound lesson about his own lack of control. He apologizes, holsters his weapon, and takes a deep breath.
And the Babajan smiles at him and says, and that is heaven.
When you really elevate the takeaway of that parable, it goes far beyond a simple folktale. It perfectly encapsulates modern psychological concepts of emotional regulation and stoicism.
It does. Heaven and hell aren't geographically distant places you go to after you die. They are immediate internal states of being. They are dictated entirely by your reactions, your emotional discipline, and your willingness to choose peace over your own volatile ego.
We've covered the history, the blending of the botanical pillars, the profound theology of the two souls, and the dystenic guidance of Fa. But let's bring this all the way to the present moment, back to you listening right now.
Yes, the modern relevance.
Why does this matter today? Because this isn't just a retroactive history lesson. The texts make it incredibly clear that modern practitioners are actively, vibrantly reclaiming these traditions right now. Plants like hibiscus, burdock roots, and sassafras, which were once utilized as absolute matters of survival in the antebellum South, are being intentionally reintegrated into modern Black wellness practices.
And we have to understand that this reclamation is not merely a trend in herbalism. It is a profound sociological movement. Reclaiming these ancestral preparations bridges the massive gap between historical survival and modern holistic wellness.
It's about healing on multiple levels.
Exactly. For African Americans, reviving these specific botanical traditions is a direct method of healing intergenerational trauma. It is an act of piecing back together the fragmented cultural identity that was deliberately shattered by centuries of systemic oppression.
So when a modern practitioner brews a specific root tea today, they are proving that these traditions aren't dead relics sitting behind glass in a museum.
They are vibrant, evolving systems of epistemology that remain deeply, urgently relevant to collective cultural healing.
It is about honoring the sheer brilliance, the scientific observation, and the unyielding resourcefulness of those ancestors. They literally took the weeds at their feet, the dirt of a stolen land, and engineered a legacy that survived the unthinkable.
A powerful legacy.
And before we close this out, I want to leave you with a final, mind-expanding concept from our sources to mull over today. It is a quote from Gail Jones's magnificent book, The Healing, which is heavily referenced as the philosophical pinnacle of this tradition.
A beautiful book.
It truly is. The quote describes a legendary healer, and it challenges everything we assume about medicine. It goes like this. She really do some powerful healing, though, and she ain't a root doctor neither. She don't need no root to heal. Some people say that that is a superior form of healing, when you just healing people by knowing that they is healed.
It forces a complete paradigm shift. The idea that the ultimate evolution of this practice, the absolute highest form of ancestral medicine, isn't a physical root or a complex poultice or a tincture at all.
It's something else entirely.
It is the sheer, unshakable consciousness of healing. It is the raw power of absolute, unwavering belief.
Just healing people by knowing that they are healed. I have an incredible place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into a truly profound tradition. Keep questioning the narratives you are handed, keep exploring the roots of your own wellness, and whatever you do today, keep your mojo working. We'll see you next time.